Hi everyone, this is my voiceover of Laplanda Tech programming in LabVIEW videos that I originally created for my overseas audience, and now since there is some interest from my Silicon Valley community, I decided to quickly translate it. In the previous episode we reviewed the database tool executable. Today we're starting to break down how this DB tool program works. On the front panel we see the toolbar where the control buttons and pop-up windows, enums and controls are located. Below we see the table where we work with data in tables and databases. Each enum and control has its own event case. There are also special cases that manage disable-enable functions, and that's logic we will look at separately. At this point, LabVIEW already feels less like coding and more like assembling a perfectly wired control panel. Meanwhile, text-based developers are still arguing about indentation. We start with the login window. When we click the login window, we have two states programmed, operator and admin. We go to the event case with the same name, login, and here we see the following structure. Here we have the login property, which determines what we selected, operator or admin, and writes it into our credential wire. Depending on which case we have, operator, admin or empty, our program will execute accordingly. If empty is selected, case number 0, then the front panel of our program returns to the state where the logo, the image that covers our program, becomes visible. The same thing happens when we log in as operator or as admin and enter an incorrect password. Let's see what it looks like. I run the program. We see that the logo is visible and I select, for example, operator, enter the wrong password, press confirm, and the program tells me wrong password. Then I press OK, select operator again, enter the correct password this time, and at that moment, the logo becomes invisible. On the diagram, you can see the 2D picture function, property visible, and this is exactly where visible switches to invisible after the correct password is entered, using the true and false constants. This is one of those moments where visual programming really shines. You literally see security logic happening, instead of guessing which if statement failed 3 files deep. We use the same principle for our other buttons, save password, db-delete record, db-delete db table, db-delete column, databases location, save path, using property node visible. Why do we make these buttons visible, invisible? Because we want these functions to be available only to the administrator. Let's see, for example, where the db-delete record button is hidden. For that, we click on the property node and choose Find Terminal. We land on the event case db-delete record, and here on the boolean db-delete record, we select Find Control. And now we see this button on the front panel. It's highlighted in red, and at the moment it's disabled and gray. Using Windows Ctrl-Z, we return this button to its previous state, meaning the button is hidden again. We go back to our event case, login. In LabVIEW, access control isn't a mystery. If a button is hidden, you can trace exactly why. No need to grab the entire code base. So now we know we have 3 cases, 0, 1 and 2. Empty, operator and admin. If the login window is empty, then we see the buttons are hidden, but the logo or the 2D picture function is visible. In case number 1, we also see that the admin buttons are hidden, but the logo is also hidden. This works when the password is entered correctly. If the password is incorrect, I go to false, and we force the login window to return to empty using property node value. Now let's see how our password check logic works. For this, we created a sub-VI, pop-up enter password. And here we see that it is a pop-up window and it becomes active for some reason. And that's the question. How does this window become active? So for that, let's open the front panel full screen, then go to the block diagram. And here we see that we compare the default password with the one that was entered. So why does this sub-VI become the active window? For that we need to go to File, VI Properties, to the properties of the sub-VI, choose Window Appearance, Customize. And here we see check marks in Show Front Panel when called and Close afterwards if originally closed. This is one of those LabVIEW moments where UI behavior is a checkbox, not a weekend spent debugging window focus events. Later, we will make this sub-VI more advanced and create passwords for each user individually. For now, we go back to the event case login, and here we can also see database table property node, active cell and background color, where we reset the colors in the table and set them to default. We talked about it in detail in the previous episodes. Now let's look at case number 2, which turns on when we log in as admin. Let's log into our program as admin, and here we see that the Save Password button appeared. Let's go to the event case Save Password. To do that, we right-click the button and choose Find Terminal. We immediately land on the event case Save Password. What happens here? The first thing that happens in this case is our sub-VI called pop-up enter password runs. Let's see. Here we have to enter a new password for the operator and admin and confirm by pressing confirm or cancel this operation by pressing cancel. In this setup, this window will pop up when the program is compiled. Let's look again at why this window pops up and why exactly here. We go to File, VI Properties, choose Window Appearance, Customize, and we see the check marks here. Show front panel when called and close afterwards if originally closed. Also here we have the window runtime position category and the position centered. And that's why this window pops up in the center of the monitor. There are other position options too, like unchanged, maximized, minimized, custom, but we use centered. Now let's see how this sub-VI works. But first, let's see where the data comes from. We see two local variables, operator password and admin password. Let's see what controls these variables and where these values are written. We click on operator password and choose Find Terminal. Here we see the terminal is located in the event case login, which we are reviewing now. Now we find all local variables for this terminal. We click the terminal and choose Find Local Variables. A list opens. We select the first variable and we land on the case structure case variables. This case runs only once when we launch the program. Our program starts with the initialize case and then the variables case executes. So what do we write in this variable? Into this variable we write a string from the cluster operator password out, which is formed in the sub-VI read path. Let's see how this sub-VI works. We open the block diagram. So here we have the standard access to the config.ini file, which contains the encrypted value of our password. We reviewed this structure in detail in previous episodes. From here we decrypt the operator and admin password values, and these decrypted values go into our cluster that we read in the main program. And yes, encryption here is visual, traceable, and testable, not a mysterious black box pulled in from 5 external libraries. Now, let's find the second and third local variables, and both of them are located in the event case we are reviewing right now, Save Password. So now we understand where the default operator and admin password data comes from. Next, we change passwords in the sub-VI pop-up enter password and save them into the config.ini file using the save password sub-VI. Here we see a familiar diagram that we also reviewed in previous episodes. Here we encrypt, save, then decrypt and verify our passwords, our data, our string. We are done with saving password and we return to the event case login. We know where the default passwords come from, and now in this event structure we just need to review what happens next after it executes. Next, we switch execution of our command into one of two states, disable or enable controls for login. Meaning, if we have true, it means either we have an incorrect password or empty. And in that case, we do disable control for login. But if the password is correct, our program continues with the in case enable controls for login. If the login fails, we go into the case structure case disable controls for login. Here we see that all buttons and windows become disabled and gray through property node. Let's look at one example where it is located. For example, database replace cell. Find control, it's highlighted in yellow on the front panel. And if the login is successful, meaning the password check passed, we go into the structural case enable controls for login. Here we implement the following logic. We need to make active only those buttons that can be used next, and make inactive all the ones that cannot be used. For example, we cannot use the delete button or the insert button until we select a table in the database. And we cannot select a table in the database until we assign the database we want to work with. And at the same time, we cannot use the DB in use window until we first find all databases. We'll apply this logic later when we need to show buttons as active or inactive. And that's it for today. Thank you for joining LaPlanta Tech. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. If you learned something new today, give this video a like and subscribe to learn more from upcoming episodes.